Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you may be joining us from around the world. A warm welcome to the global launch of the 2025 Human Development Report. I am an AI-generated voice of a real staff at UNDP, honored to introduce Esther Paniagua, award-winning journalist and acclaimed author, as the moderator of today's event. Esther has received multiple journalism awards in the field of AI, been named twice to Forbes 100 Most Creative People in Business, and recognized as one of Spain's top 100 women leaders. We are truly thrilled to have her guide us today's dialogue. Please join me in welcoming Esther Paniagua.
Thank you, AI Voice. And hello, everyone. Hola a todos y todas. Bonjour. It is my pleasure once again to welcome you in the global launch of the 2025 edition of the Human Development Report. It is a real pleasure to guide you through the unveiling of this very important publication, the 35th edition of one of UN's most influential reports that reaches over 3 million people across 220 countries and territories. This special launch is co-hosted by the UN Development Programme, the European Commission, and the Belgian government. A truly symbolic place to discuss about AI and its implications for human development. Indeed, that's precisely the focus of this year's Human Development Report, a matter of choice, people and possibilities in the age of AI. The report features the Human Development Index, which tracks progress across a variety of indicators. And as we will see later, we are at a critical moment. Progress in human development is slowing down, and inequalities are rising. And yet, more than half of the world global population remains hopeful that AI can help improve their lives. This report is not about technology, it's about people. It's not about predictions, it's about choices. It moves away from techno-solutionism, from promises of utopia or threats of apocalypse, or polarizing narratives, or blind optimism, or doomerism. It moves away from all that, and instead it explores how human choices can shape the way AI transforms our societies to ensure it's developed and used to support human progress, to augment human capabilities, to support well-being, and to foster inclusive development. Because ultimately, it is up to us. Today's agenda is filled with powerful insights from diverse perspectives. And for those joining online via Zoom, welcome everyone. We would love you to take part. Please use the Q&A box to raise any questions. And also live interpretation in French and in Spanish is available. Just click the language button. Now, to officially open this event, it's my honor to welcome the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Belgium, Maxime Prévost. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam. Excellencies, colleagues, friends, it's the first time I discover this palace, to be honest. It's not far from my office, and it's a real honor to join you here for the global launch of the Human Development Report 2025, together with UNDP, of course, an institution with which Belgium shares a long-standing, deeply valued partnership. For 4 years now, Belgium has had the privilege of co-hosting the Brussels launch of this important report. These events have consistently been a moment to pause and reflect not just on what the data tell us, but on what kind of future we are shaping. Today, we bring this tradition to a global setting, underlining our commitment to the multilateral system. Human development challenges are global, and so must be our response. This year's report couldn't be more timely. The world is seeing rapid technological advancement. AI offers extraordinary promise to accelerate innovation, extend access to healthcare and education, and unlock solutions for climate change, agriculture, and mobility. The report offers a powerful message. The future remains a matter of choice. I witnessed this first and last week during my trip to Central Africa, and Belgium will continue to support innovation and entrepreneurship as an investment in the future of youth. But the report also reminds us that progress is not linear. It warns us of persistent inequalities, even reversals in human development, about the risk of exclusion, disinformation, bias, and deep inequality, especially when access is unequal and governance is weak. Perhaps surprisingly, AI also presents significant environmental challenges. Global AI systems are projected to consume the equivalent of driving 187 million times around the Earth with an electric vehicle. Data centers require vast water resources for cooling, and specialized chips powering AI are built with materials often sourced from conflict zones. The development of AI must therefore be guided by respect for human rights, transparency, accountability, and fairness. It must not deepen inequalities or erode democratic values. We must ensure that developing countries can access, shape, and benefit from AI. No single country, company, or sector can manage the risk of seize the full benefits of AI alone. We are at critical juncture with global AI. Governance is not optional but essential. Just as we build multilateral rules for trade, climate, and public health, we need shared guardrails to ensure AI serves humanity. This is why Belgium and the EU are committed to a human-centric digital transformation. We must foster digital capacities, uphold fundamental rights, and ensure that no one is left behind. These are not just words. We lead with action. Belgium is a co-founder of the D4D app, which is now a key component of the Global Gateway. We foster multi-stakeholder collaboration, boost investments, and facilitate dialogue to work towards a human-centric digital transformation worldwide. With these efforts, we reflect our commitment of the Global Digital Compact's vision of harnessing digital technology for global cooperation and closing digital divides. Going further, the EU has moved early by proposing the first worldwide legislation that follow a risk-based approach, all while offering economic actors a solid and predictable legal framework within which they can sell their ER services and applications. I believe this European approach is adequate and offers good guiding principles for partners across the world. Belgium's private sector also plays a pivotal role in this digital transformation. Our companies and SMEs, ranging from agile AR startups to established tech and industrial leaders, are contributing cutting-edge innovation in ethical AR, health, sustainability logistics, and advanced manufacturing. We are proud that Belgium's expertise in ER is not only commercially competitive, but socially conscious. This is the model we must scale, one that links innovation with inclusion and technology with the public good. We must turbocharge the Sustainable Development Goals with the power of AI, from optimizing energy use to detecting early disease, from climate forecasting to expanding access to education and justice. AI must be harnessed to serve our development goals. As we move forward, let us ensure that AI serves humanity, upholds our values, and drives progress towards a better world. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Minister. Indeed, there are many challenges ahead that we can address with our choices. And thank you also for your commitment to multilateralism, now more important than ever. And we will address both issues later in the panels that we have ahead. Now we have a video message from Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission.
Deputy Prime Minister Prévost, Administrator Steiner, dear Kunduns, ladies and gentlemen, it's a real pleasure to speak to you today and to welcome this vital report on artificial intelligence. When the UNDP was founded in 1965, it gave the United Nations a laser-like focus on poverty and inequality. And it brought countries and regions together in partnership to improve lives around the world. The UNDP helps millions of people every year, but a lot has changed in the 60 years since the UNDP was created. The world is facing many new challenges, and artificial intelligence is one of the biggest. As this new report says, the world is pulsing with a powerful new technology. AI has moved from fantasy to fact. 2/3 of people around the world expect to use AI within a year. Areas like health, education, and work are being transformed. And the revolution has only just begun. So, how should we deal with this crucial issue? How can we make sure that countries and people benefit from the AI revolution? Now, let's look at what Europe is doing at home and in partnerships around the world. Here in Europe, we want to be leading as an AI continent to improve lives, promote our values, and help humanity. We're investing. We're building 13 AI factories and 5 gigafactories to unlock 200 billion euros in overall investment. But with artificial intelligence, there are risks as well as rewards. So we have brought in a new set of rules for a European approach to safeguard our citizens and maximize benefits. Because AI needs to be safe to have the confidence of Europeans. But our focus must also be broader than Europe, because there is a danger that AI will grow the digital divide between wealthy nations and the global south. And that's why Europe is also working with partners so that everyone can take part in this AI revolution. Let me give you 5 examples. Firstly, our Global Gateway strategy is investing in infrastructure and capacity in partner countries. For example, a satellite AI factory in Morocco that is thus helping tech startups across Africa. Second, to support these efforts, the European Union is joining the Executive Steering Board of the AI Hub for Sustainable Development. This is a vital initiative led by Italy, the G7 and the UNDP, with a strong focus on Africa. Thirdly, we have formed a powerful digital alliance with Latin America and Caribbean partners. Fourthly, we're working with Asian partners on global cybersecurity. And finally, we're developing super accurate AI weather forecasts to warn about dangerous tropical storms, for example. And of course, to help rescue efforts around the world. So you see, AI can be a gift to humanity. This important report shows that the future is in our hands. The choices we make now will determine our tomorrow. With the right choices, we can open new pathways, helping everyone to thrive in a world with artificial intelligence. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President von der Leyen. And of course, as she highlighted, cooperation is essential so that AI becomes a gift for humanity. Now, without further ado, it's my distinct pleasure to welcome Achim Steiner, Administrator of the United Nations Development Programme. Big applause.
Thank you very much, dear Esther, also for agreeing to be with us today for this very special occasion. Deputy Prime Minister, Director General, distinguished guests, including Professor Michael Spence, who has been a part of this journey in bringing to you once again one of UNDP's proudest products and flagship products, the Human Development Report. And Deputy Prime Minister, every year we have a launch also in Belgium because we do launch this report, and this is one of the remarkable opportunities UNDP has in over 130 countries around the world. But this year we are in Brussels for the global launch. This is our first moment of stepping before the world and saying, we have something important to share with you. And I also want to recognize Pedro Conceição and the HDR team because every year they make us proud in the way that they're able to mobilize collective intelligence. Yes, there is a significant part of today's report that will deal with artificial intelligence, but at the end of the day, what the Human Development Report does year after year, it enables us to observe from many vantage points around the world things that can either unite us or divide us, that can accelerate development or perhaps stop development. As with everything in our lives, there are risks and opportunities. I hope that this year's report will strike a chord with you as it has done, surprisingly, when we surveyed over 21,000 people across the world and asked them, what do you think about AI? In some ways, they have already a far more pragmatic view of AI. First of all, most of them know about AI, and not in the sense of a software programmer or somebody who understands ChatGPT. They just know that they are already affected and even users, even if they don't know it, of AI, both in the positive and perhaps in the negative sense. Above all, they understand how important it is to appreciate that as with everything that humanity has discovered and developed over millennia, it is what we choose to do with it that will define its relevance to the future, to each one of us. For us in the United Nations Development Programme, homing in on artificial intelligence at this moment in time is a very deliberate part of trying to address what is a series of developments that have left us all with a great and deeper sense of uncertainty about the future. Indeed, previous human development reports homed in on this phenomenon of fear and uncertainty that is both being weaponized politically in many of our countries, but that ultimately reflect a deep sense of uncertainty about what will come next. Our report this year is an unapologetic invitation to not be intimidated, to emancipate ourselves vis-à-vis a technology that is nothing but a technology at the moment, developed by humans, and in the way that it will be deployed by humans, hopefully in a way that both you, Prime Minister, and also Ursula von der Leyen just pointed out, is a matter of choice. I'm inspired by the way that this report has homed in on the fact that, yes, we are talking about a technology frontier that will change virtually every aspect of our lives, let us be clear. But that, in the first instance, what this Human Development Report reminds us of is that we don't have to be imprisoned by a techno-determinist, supply-framed narrative only. In fact, what this report shows is how human beings and the demand side to a new technology frontier should actually be our focus. This is what the Human Development Report this year is trying to point towards. Now, we don't have answers in the sense that there is a simple, singular answer. But what we have put our finger on the pulse of is an extraordinary capacity of humanity to shape the things yet to come, and above all, not to be ruled by a technology, but rather to rule its use, including in that extraordinary spectrum between entrepreneurial ingenuity, the capacity of the private sector to mobilize, to scale up, to develop products, to be singularly capable of understanding what people might need, and sometimes singularly incapable of understanding that certain things that you try to make people believe they need, they do not in fact need. This is also part of the story of the digital frontier of the last decade and a half. But, and this is also crucial, the way that we are able to reconcile the private entrepreneurial good, so to speak, namely to not only generate ideas, but then products and services that are profitable, that allow a business idea to succeed, and all the startups around the world that are demonstrating this every day. And by the way, not only in Silicon Valley or in Shenzhen or maybe in Europe, but actually all across the world, including the African continent, we are seeing an extraordinary new frontier of entrepreneurship. But the public good equally needs attention, and we know that in most of our national jurisdictions, and certainly at a global level, we are lagging behind where technology is racing ahead. This may not always necessarily result in a negative outcome, but it creates an extraordinary risk, namely the inability of a society to govern the way a technology is used. And we know that artificial intelligence opens up extraordinary new frontiers, including, let us be honest, in the way that it can be weaponized, literally and metaphorically. Development in the 21st century is all about opportunity. It is also about trying to address something that this year's Human Development Report with the Human Development Index has also focused on. World, we are in trouble. The HDI, for the first time in 35 years, if you put a bracket around the 2 years of the COVID pandemic, is actually showing a growing number of countries being, in a sense, delinked from a global economic progression. Human development progress last year is estimated to have been at its slowest since the 35 years that we have been measuring it. And remember, the amazing breakthrough that the Human Development Index brought to measuring human progress and development progress was to not limit ourselves to income per capita GDP growth. It introduced life expectancy, it introduced education, it broadened the understanding of what a human condition in a positive development progress pathway is perceived to be by people. And this Human Development Index is sending us flashing warning lights, a world in which dozens of countries are stagnating, in which some countries are able to take off, and in which the risk of concentrating economic and technological power in the hands of some will ultimately lead to crisis for the world as a whole, which is where I want to end my remarks, which is also, Deputy Prime Minister, where you alluded to. The Secretary General at the Summit of the Future last year proposed to the world also a global digital compact. The fact that we are turning back to international institutions in something that perhaps 10 years ago nobody would have thought that multilateralism would be relevant is a reminder that in a world of technological frontiers in the 21st century, national borders are just one defining element. Our ability, for example, to also contain the risk of cyber terrorism, cyber crime, the broader notion of cybersecurity is a reminder that the weakest link in the chain is also the greatest Achilles heel to a global community of 7.5, soon 8 billion people, increasingly relying on digital technology, public infrastructure, artificial intelligence, data. Our ability to exploit in the positive sense this new frontier, but to also protect ourselves, demands by definition international cooperation, including by wealthier countries helping poorer countries to first of all become a part of this emerging development economy of the future, but also by helping to invest in urgently building up the capacities of governments to govern, to invest in cybersecurity, and to invest in our collective interest to ensure that the frontier of AI truly is something that will give us as human beings the opportunity to augment our ingenuity, our diversity, our imagination, our entrepreneurship, and above all, a confidence that in the 21st century, we can develop and thrive together while also confronting the risks to our future together. In that sense, a moment that truly for us in the United Nations Development Programme is an illustration of listening to a world of many different realities and coming together around the idea that there is a United Nations logic in the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Achim, for your important remarks and for the unapologetic invitation to not be intimidated by something that is a mere tool. Yes, a powerful tool, a powerful technology, a general purpose technology that we, let's not forget, develop, shape, and govern. And as you said, Achim, we shouldn't let the suppliers be the ones deciding. We will continue to talk about this, the discussion after our next segment. But now it's time to discover the core insights of the 2025 Human Development Report. And for that, we have no less than Pedro Conceição, Director of the Human Development Report Office.
Thank you, Esther. Deputy Prime Minister, Koen, Mike, dear Achim. I need to thank you for your support, not only for this report, but for several human development reports over the last few years, and for allowing the Human Development Report Office, so on behalf of my team, to continue to put out there to all of you what is essentially an invitation to the world. An invitation to the world to take a look in the mirror and see how are we doing when it comes to human development. It's very simple but powerful idea that people should be allowed, enabled to live their lives to their full potential. And one of the ways in which we try to take account of this, on whether we're making progress or not towards fulfilling this aspiration, as Achim mentioned, is by looking at the Human Development Index. Now, the Human Development Index this year has recorded its highest level ever. But there are two concerning aspects to this achievement, and they've already been alluded to. First is the fact that we are making slower progress, in fact, the slowest progress on record if we exclude the period in which the HDI declined. So on this chart, you can see that if the world had continued to make progress on the Human Development Index as it was doing pre-2020, we would be living in a very high Human Development Index by 2030. But look at the trend now. It has sort of flattened down. And this mark of living in a very high Human Development Index has been delayed by decades. Secondly, we are seeing that the countries with the lowest level of the Human Development Index are falling further and further behind, now for the fourth year in a row. And this, as you can see, is a break with a trend that had been going on for decades, where we were seeing a convergence in the Human Development Index across countries. So this sets the context for the exploration in this year's report of artificial intelligence. And consistent with the human development approach that is people-centered, we went out there to the world and asked people what they thought of AI. And the results were striking. I thought they were striking. We found that about 1 in 5 people around the world is already using AI in virtually all levels of the Human Development Index. But the surprising aspect, at least to me, was that 2/3 of people expect AI to be part of their lives within the next year, in their education, health, or work. So this is not a prediction about what will happen. It's what people expect. And so this report, in a sense, is a way to give response to this expectation and invite us all to consider what kind of choices can we make, can governments make, can firms make to harness AI to advance human development. And we do that by first articulating how is AI different. It's a new technology. We know a lot about how technologies help to advance human development, help to propel economies, advance economic productivity, advance living standards. But how is AI different? Is it just something that is supercharging the digital transformation of the past? And we argue that AI does more things than previous digital tools, but does not do everything better than previous digital tools. There are things that AI actually doesn't do very well. It's a technology, a tool that gives us answers to questions related to all sorts of things that go beyond just doing a search on the internet, as we all know. It is very accessible in a decentralized way. So AI, until very recently, was deployed by firms or governments in the background. Now it's at the forefront of people. It's accessible to people. But as people interact with AI, the answers they get reflect where the training data comes from and where these models were developed, as you can see on this slide, where there is a very high correlation between the answers that we get from AI and countries at the very high levels of the Human Development Index. So it's a technology that offers new opportunities to automate some tasks that may be tedious, but it's a technology that also makes mistakes, sometimes makes things up. And so that means that just looking at this technology as something that will just automate more things, yes, it can perhaps automate some things, but we have to be careful and not to delegate full automation when it comes to important decisions. And people expect something along these lines. So what you see on this chart is the responses to our survey on whether people expect AI to automate things on the vertical axis or augment what people can do on the horizontal axis. And the dots represent responses to the survey by different countries across different occupations. So people are realistic, right? People see that AI is something that will involve inevitably some automation. But you see that the dots concentrate on the sort of blue triangle. So people expect more augmentation to come out of AI. Again, this is not a prediction, but it's an expectation. And I think we need to be very mindful of these expectations, of what people expect to happen. Because people understand what's happening. People understand what this technology can do and cannot do. So I think that this is particularly important in a context in which many low-income countries see their development pathways that in the past used to flow through manufacturing and export-led manufacturing particularly, supported by external financing. Those pathways are narrowing. So there is now an opportunity to look at AI as a way to trigger new ways of creating jobs, increasing economic productivity, and increasing living standards. But this has to be done also in a way that doesn't rely on deploying AI for AI's sake. Daran Acemoglu used the expression of so-so AI. That is terrible, right? Because if you just go with the logic that AI can do everything and can automate everything, when AI is actually not very good, you end up replacing people, not increasing economic productivity, and exacerbating all of these negative externalities that the Deputy Prime Minister spoke about, including environmental externalities, as well as, let's not forget, there's a lot of hidden labor behind AI. These are just not some genius programmers coming up with these algorithms. There are many people working behind the scenes in labeling data, for instance. So it's an opportunity that can be harnessed if we take the right measure about what AI can and cannot do. One of the things that AI can potentially do is to become not only an invention, but can become the invention of a method of invention. So what you have there on the slide is a quote. I don't know if you can read it. So it says, "Not a human move, so beautiful." This is a comment that was made by actually the European champion of a game, a table game, very ancient, called Go, which is a very complex game, much more complex than chess, for instance. And there was an AI model that trained itself to play this game and was able to beat the global master in Go, with a move that elicited this comment. Now look at the chart. These points represent the performance of human players. And the shaded part represents what happened after this AI model beat the global master of Go. So you see a stagnation in human performance, and all of a sudden, it starts to go up. Now, it's not a level change, right? It's a change in trend. It's sort of moving up. Now, you may argue that, this game is not very relevant for human development. What good does this do to human development? I don't know, some Go players may disagree. But the point here is that AI is giving humanity a new tool to move towards this fundamental human aspiration of understanding and creating. And this can expand scientific achievements, technological innovations, but also empowering people wherever they live in very fundamentally new ways to solve the problems that they confront and empower them also to pursue the ventures that are important to them. Now, AI, you knew this was coming, also has risks and challenges. So what you see on this slide is the distribution of mental well-being over age in different parts of the world. So mental well-being increases with age. This is a new pattern. For many years, what we saw was sort of a U-shaped. So younger people and older people had higher levels of mental well-being than people sort of my age, in the middle. We were sort of the bottom. So there has been a decline in the mental well-being of young people, with a particularly emphasis, or it's particularly salient for teenage girls and young women, that parallels the diffusion of AI and many of the digital technologies that have spread recently. So it's very difficult to attribute causality here, because obviously there are many factors that come into play and determine something as complex as mental well-being. But the fact that there is this paralleling of the diffusion of this technology invites us to reflect that when we look at the potential of AI to do many of the things that I alluded to, we also need to be mindful of the potential challenges that come with it. And in the report, we look not only at young people, but at the effects of AI across different life stages. And also the risks that come with looking at AI as simply a solution to address challenges that, for instance, people living with disabilities or the difficulties in the care work could be relied upon as a technological fix. So if we look at the challenges that we confront in these areas, by deploying technology just to sort of fill gaps or limitations and forget the broader social context in which, and economic context in which these activities take place, then we may actually be exacerbating inequalities. So I'll conclude with the key message that you've already heard, that this is a report that invites us to consider choices, in a sense to reclaim choices from narratives that are techno-deterministic, saying that technology will determine our future, that abdicate our power to shape our future by making choices, we suggest, in three directions. First, building what we call a complementary economy. This means economies in which machines and humans are not competing, but are actually working together, so that we leverage what AI can do to augment what people can do. Secondly, innovation with intent. So innovation with intent is this idea that AI could be this invention of a method of invention. And here, again, the idea is not to do this by automating parts of the creative process, but again, augmenting the creative process. And this also has to do with the evolution of AI itself, the direction in which AI evolves, and the importance, for instance, of having benchmarks that look at the performance of these models in ways that go beyond their capacities, and not being obsessed with this notion that, are they surpassing humans? Are they better than humans? That's not the real question, from a human development perspective at least. The real question has to be, how are they helpful to humans? So benchmarks that look beyond capacities and beyond safety, important though they are, towards to what extent are innovations in AI helpful to humans would be important. And then the final aspect is this idea of investing in capabilities that count. Because looking ahead, the big divide is not likely to be one between people and AI. It's likely to be one with people with the capabilities to harness and thrive in a world with AI, and those that don't have those capabilities. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. We now have a better look, more knowledge about the Human Development Report, enough to foster the next discussions that we have ahead. And as we announced earlier, we have now a multilateral dialogue to talk about the issues about cooperation and how necessary they are. Thank you very much, Pedro, because actually it's important to be aware that there are concerns, but there is hope. And as the Human Development Report makes clear, we face important choices, specifically policy choices that build capacities, protect human rights, and guide inclusive innovation. And precisely to manage those risks and the benefits that AI can bring to humanity and to ensure that they are all shared, cooperation is essential. And that's the focus of the multilateral dialogue that we have now. So let me introduce the panelists. Our first panelist is joining in a virtual way. She is Rebecca Greenspan, Secretary General of UNCTAD. As I said, joining virtually. Hello, Rebecca. And then physically here we have Koen Doens, Director General for International Partnerships at the European Commission. Please join me, or perhaps that side. Yeah, should be better. Sorry about that. And again, welcome back, Achim Steimer, UNDP Administrator. Let's have a seat. Let's kick off with a question for you all about the Human Development Report, of course, and what do you believe is like the most important issues that we need to tackle or that we need to shape with global policy, or that should be in the global policy discussions? What's the main topic that should be there in this, under discussion right now? Perhaps we can start with Rebecca.
Hello, and it's a pleasure to be here. I'm sorry I'm not there with all of you, but you know, the Human Development Report is one of the most expected and most important reports of the UN. And I want to congratulate Achim Steiner and Pedro Concienzao for taking the report to the next level. Really, really is wonderful to see this happening. Let me maybe highlight 3 things from the report, if you allow me. I think that the first one is the moment that we are living in. Yes, this issue that we are in a slow progress of human development and a divergence path between certain countries that are being lagging behind and others that are able to progress further. And that we, as a global society, has not recovered from COVID-19 and the aftershocks that we received after COVID-19. I think that is very important because in a way, many times the averages do hide more than they reveal. And it's very important to put this divergence and different paths forward very strongly. And this goes together with one of the things that comes from the report, that is that we have slow progress, but fast change. And this creates new tensions and imbalances in society. And, you know, many times I say that when we have accelerated change, when change is very rapid, you know, not everything changes at the same pace. And so new asymmetries, new imbalances came into play. And I think that the report puts that very clearly on the table. My second point and takeaway is I like very much what the report says, that is that we have to go beyond this online-offline dichotomy, that there is much more to talk about when we talk about AI, and that humans are more than the task they perform. And I think that this is a very important part of the report that goes to the center of this augmenting versus substitution issue in the discussion of AI. And this also, this is part of what a very important part of the report on terms of the decline in mental health of young people. That I think that is a centerpiece of our challenges for the future. And my last point is the point of this is a matter of choice, and that Ahim also put very clearly on the table. And what are the choices that we have and the recommendations that we have, and the issue that we as human beings are capable of connection, of moral reasoning, of collective action, and putting again the emphasis on the choices that we have to make for the future. So I think that these 3 points are essential in what we heard today from the report and what we read from this wonderful, wonderful report. I only want to make one point that we make in our, because we made a science and development report also very on AI. And I would like just to mention one aspect that we mentioned that maybe here has not, was not the place to put, but is the issue of the concentration of power and a market share that we see in the AI technology. And I think that this is a very important point if we look for the future in terms of the recommendations of what we should do. We, for example, give the number that in 2024, just 3 companies, each had market capitalizations exceeding $3 trillion. Just as a comparison, the GDP of Africa, the GDP of the whole Africa is 2.8 trillion. So these companies have a capitalization ratio that is higher than the whole GDP of Africa. And I think that this is something that we should not marginalize, in the sense that in terms of choices, part of the capacity of the world to do choices is to have a governance institutions that will be able also to counteract the power and the concentration of power that we see also in the marketplace of the AI, the AI realm, the AI economies. Thank you.
So, thank you, Rebecca. Would you consider then that this is the most urgently issue to be discussed or considered in global policy discussions, or
No.
is any of the other takeaways from the report that you were highlighting?
Let me maybe say something here. You know, in such complex issues, only complexity can save us. Yes, we cannot be reductionist in the things that we should do. I think that there are policy recommendations in the report that are very important. We also have policy recommendations with respect to governance and the competition, you know, making competition in the marketplace, but you have also the issues of human rights, yes, and the issues of regulations and privacy and data that are very important for this. And this is something that has been very well discussed in the global digital compact, in the Pact of the Future in the UN. And I think that the recommendations that are there are very important to go forward in terms of policy action.
And building on that, do you think that today's governance structure are capable of managing the power of Silicon Valley, or we need a new digital compact, or to strengthen the one that we already have, or what do you think we should do? And
It's
I will
not
open
only
the floor to Achim. And
yeah, it's not only Silicon Valley here, but let's go to our Director General, because Europe has been really struggling in putting the right regulation and in taxation, in human rights, in privacy, and it's not easy because it requires a global effort, and that's why the UN has come in, as a very rightly so Ahim has said. Yes, there is something that has to be more global than only individual countries or regions trying to push the agenda forward. But I think that Europe is a very important partner in being able to make progress in this direction.
yeah, and indeed we are the first one having like AI regulation that is transversal or horizontal. So Koen, of course, for you were alluded, and also something that was like slightly covered, and it is, power is shifting from state actors to corporations, but also now, perhaps more concerningly, to emerging techno-state alliances that are pressuring Europe to be or enforce less heavily the regulations. So what's your view?
Well, thanks a lot, and thanks, Rebecca, for reminding us of the leading role that Europe takes, indeed, with our Digital Market Act, Digital Services Act, and now, indeed, with the Artificial Intelligence Act. I mean, it does chime with what I find a real key takeaway from the report. And again, I mean, congratulations to Pedro and the team, as every year they produce something that is really very juicy, full of substance, but still a digestible meal. You can actually draw something from it. And for me, the main takeaway really is this whole idea that we're actually the masters of our future. And I think it's the key thing that we must take with us, because very often when we talk about AI, it's almost as if things escape us. And that's indeed not true. And I think the report very clearly shows that that's the case. When I was reading it, I had to think of this poem that Nelson Mandela liked quoting, Invictus, where he says, "I'm the master of my fate, the captain of my soul." And I really think that applies to this. And it means you need to articulate that, in my view, in two ways. First, in the way in which you unleash the potential and the force of AI, but also in how you then put on the guardrails. I mean, the faster you drive with the car, the more important it is that you have the guardrails. And I think that's what we've been trying to do in Europe, but that applies to the globe as such. I mean, I read recently a study of the global consulting, the Boston Consulting Group. They did a polling in a number of African countries, South Africa, Nigeria, and Morocco, with entrepreneurs, and all of them, I mean, 75%, quoted AI as one of their strategic top priorities. But at the same time, 60% of them also said that it was something they were really scared and worried about, not because of what it could do, but because they felt that they missed the skills, the talent to actually do that. And I think, therefore, that what really struck me as an important part of the report was this importance on investing in capabilities. And if you then look at what Europe has been doing, indeed, we have on the whole guardrail side, the whole regulatory side, come up with very strong legislative framing, regulatory frameworks. But we've also been investing, the President has referred to it, to how you unlock then the whole innovation drive with an innovation strategy, with an action plan on AI, and with things like these AI factories, where we actually make available to companies, to small and medium-sized enterprises, basically the places where they can find the skills, the data, and the computing power. So we're looking at this in this, let's say, ecosystem way and driving that agenda. Now, I think it's important, and for me, this is really the thing I would like to stress, that we make sure that partners across the globe can be part of the way in which we shape it. I mean, we see that a number of them are looking at this. I mean, Brazil has its national AI strategy put in place. We recently had in Africa, in Kigali, Smart Africa, that organized a summit precisely to focus on AI. And the key message there, which is a crucial one in my view, is they should not just be the users of it. They should not just be the data providers of it. They should actually be equipped to help shape and design it. And it reminded me of the fact that, I mean, we are now very proud here in Belgium and so on, and when you go to a shop, you can use a mobile phone to pay and so on. But actually, the Africans were way ahead of us. It's in Kenya with the M-Pesa that they could actually pay with their phones, while we were still paying with our cards. When COVID struck in Togo, where they had focused on the whole digitalization agenda, they could actually do cash transfers to the people who needed it most through mobile phones at a time when that was not possible here. And so I think for me, and that's coming back to the question you asked, the real thing to ask us, and that should shape our global discussion, is not just how can we make sure that all parts of the world can benefit from it. It's more about how can we make sure that all parts of the world can contribute to shaping it, not just as receivers, as users, but as those that help us shape it. And I think that there, if I look at parts of the world I'm dealing with, whether it's Latin America, whether it's Asia, whether it's Africa, that there's a lot of intel, a lot of ideas there that should help us shape the right agenda.
It's interesting that you mentioned the case of mobile payments in Africa. I was talking with someone that is analyzing the use cases in Latin America, and she said that financial applications are the most widely spread because there is a need, because there's a lot of people who doesn't have a bank account, even a bank account or access to do these things that we in developed countries have been doing for years. So yeah, it makes total sense, and of course fighting the inevitability narrative is very important as well. Achim, what would be your take?
Well, first of all, my take is it's wonderful to have Rebecca and Koen also here with us, because I think they are, through their respective institutional lives, never mind personal lives, heavily invested in precisely this moment in time. I think, to me, the most important thing about this report is to, as you said, also and alluded to, Koen, I think to help people realize that, you know, there is something coming your way that you may not fully understand, even though you realize it's there. You don't have to be passive. And I think that then goes in many directions. I mean, one thing is to regulate a market in which we are not simply going to give rise to an economy of oligarchs controlling a limited number of platforms. And why do I say that? Not because entrepreneurs cannot be benevolent investors who create a global public good, but we have also seen the opposite. And I think one of the things that happens when a few control a market is that that market increasingly evolves into something that is defined really from the vantage point of those who supply the technology. And I think much of what we have learned today and over the last few years is that, you know, when we have such a new frontier, the realm of possibility is extraordinarily broad. And I think the corollary to that is what, Koen, you also alluded to just now. How do we ensure that people are active participants in this? I think as a development program of the United Nations, as somebody who deeply believes that concentration is both from a basic economic point of view never a healthy phenomenon, but particularly in a world where, you know, if Africa does not have the capital and the capacity to invest, you are de facto excluding 1.5 billion people from being players and shapers. They are simply takers. Now, you know, let's be clear, you don't have to be an architect of an AI platform in order to take advantage of it. You just made a reference to weather reports, and Ursula von der Leyen mentioned that as well. Some of us may never really touch anything directly in terms of AI, but we will be beneficiaries of that. For example, much better weather prediction, or drug discovery. and the extraordinary reduction in the cost of developing medicines that AI is enabling us to now look at has phenomenal implications for a significant part of the world population that so far is excluded from the economics of drug discovery that companies pursue because they're not able to pay for those costs. And therefore, many tropical diseases simply are not in the top 10 of drug discovery because the commercial interest simply was not there. AI can flip that. And therefore, again, an example of how something that you may never come into contact with could influence one day your ability to cure a disease. Another example of AI application is language. And you began with a kind of story yesterday about an avatar who just speaks in German. I mean, Esther is fluent in German, although she doesn't speak that much German. And it was phenomenal. Now, imagine what another app that is being developed by an African startup that is enabling many African languages to become a means by which knowledge that is always transacted in the global language of English or a few others suddenly becomes accessible to 70 languages on the African continent. What does that do to a generation that can suddenly engage with that universe of knowledge where language was an absolute barrier? So trying to understand how we can make an AI future one that is inclusive, not in a generic sense, but in a very practical way. And secondly, we may also need to learn very quickly some regulatory lessons. I've been trying to find an analogy. For example, when Europe legislated that telephone companies or communication companies would no longer be able to charge these outrageous cross-border tariffs. The minute you went for a holiday in Europe, you would suddenly be charged, extraordinary amounts of money. One act of legislation, and they were gone. And we didn't exactly stop having, cellular telephony or smartphones. It was just an example of how a private sector will exploit an opportunity until we say, no, this is actually not in the interests of people. Another interesting example of regulatory terms is deregulation, airline travel. What do we learn from the phenomenon that for a long time, air travel, particularly in the transatlantic context, was a totally publicly regulated market? Then we opened it up. It made air travel much more affordable. Delinking perhaps the ownership of data centers, the rails, so to speak, on which AI travels, from the actual ownership of the applications in order to deal with monopoly power. Now, I'm only suggesting this not as a proposal, I'm only trying to trigger a reflection on how can regulatory aspects not stifle markets, and the EU often struggles right now with many in business saying you've over-regulated. Talk to a farmer today who in the evening sits for 2-3 hours on their computer just to enter the data they have to enter, when really they set out to plow fields and grow crops, and deeply frustrated sometimes about what was an inherent logic of a common agricultural policy and a nature and environmental sustainability paradigm, but has ended up making many feel that they are over-regulated or maybe not smartly regulated. All of this, I think, is now something we urgently need to weave into this AI technology frontier.
Yeah, certainly. And you were mentioning good examples of regulation as an enabler, fighting this narrative that regulation kills innovation or stops innovation. We don't have time to address that, but it's important to take that into account. And perhaps, Rebecca, we don't have a lot of time. Perhaps we can do a very quick round. But building on what we were commenting before, because UNCTAD has long advocated for fairer global trade. So how can we prevent the further marginalization of the global south being relegated to a mere spectator, as Achim and Kuhn were saying?
Yes, it's very important. Let me give you one number. 118 global south countries has never been represented in international AI governance efforts until the end of 2024. So I think that what Kuhn and Achim has said is very important if you want to be more inclusive, not only in the diffusion of technology, but in the shaping of technology. And I think that this Human Development Report precisely said that ChatGPT represents much more the thinking and the culture of the high development index countries than the low development index countries. And this is part of it. And that's why the issue of participation, of inclusion is so important. My second point, and what we say precisely to avoid what you are saying, and building on the recommendations of the Human Development Report. First, we have to invest in AI readiness, energy access, digital infrastructure, and the whole issue of capabilities and skills. Second, we have to overcome the very slow transfer of technology because of the concentration in the market. So open source AI and shared data can really turbocharge development, especially in health, education, and climate. Third, hold industry accountable. Tech companies must be clear about how their AI systems work, the risk they pose, and the biases that they may have. And finally, South-South cooperation. Developing countries should join forces on AI research, infrastructure, and policy to grow stronger together. So these are part of the recommendations that we have given in our report on science and technology and AI.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. We have like less than a minute, so perhaps quick recommendations from both of you, or closing remarks, whatever you fancy the most.
Well, look,
I'll let you choose.
I think most of the recommendations were made already, and I think it's clear. It's on the regulatory side where I think we've got real work to do, precisely because, as you've said, as Achim said, a lot of the innovation is driven by the private sector. It's not something that the public sector will do, but the private sector therefore needs to be, let's say, guided. And so we've put in place in Europe a regulatory framework, but it's not, I mean, Europe doesn't regulate the world. And so that's why we are keen to use the various, let's say, fora that exist, whether it's G7, I mean, the AI hub, of which we will be joining the steering group, but which is led by Italy and UNDP, is a good example. G7, G20, OECD. We need that kind of discussion at multilateral level. Setting the kind of basic regulatory limits is very important, precisely to have those guardrails within which then subsequently the private sector can work. And for me, the second big one, and that's what we're doing, is to make sure that we work with partners to enable them to really participate. And that's what we are doing with our digital LAC Alliance, what we are doing with Africa, what we are doing with Asia. And if you then allow me one final comment, which is not
out of time, but
which is not inspired by artificial intelligence, but by emotional intelligence. If I'm not mistaken, this is the last time that we have here in Brussels Achim, who is ending his mandate. And so really from the heart and not from the brain. I want to thank you for outstanding leadership in all those times that we have worked so closely together. So thanks a lot, Achim.
Thank you very much. Very human moment. Achim, perhaps some quick sentence to close.
The best thing I could do right now is not say anything, I think. No, but Kun, thank you very much. In fact, we are companions in this world of development, and Kun, you have been always a great supporter of this Human Development Report as an unencumbered and unconstrained reflection on how are we doing. And I think this is one of the things that UNDP can do, but I end by also saying, just as 5-6 years ago, we moved from being an analog development organization to embracing digital, investing heavily, first of all, in our own digital literacy, and then being a credible partner to the countries of the world trying to figure out how to deal with digital public infrastructure, the human rights dimension of data also in many of these aspects. And we became a connector, so to speak. I really genuinely believe that UNDP is a great connector of instantaneous sometimes, but certainly simultaneous creativity all over the world. And Europe is certainly one center. I mean, if you look to India, the India stack, I mean, the frontiers that India has broken through with trying to leverage digital technology, and in so many other parts, you alluded to Kenya and M-Pesa and much of what enabled people to become players in a financial system that never had access to it. Banks were closed to most women in Kenya until a few years ago. Kenya has almost succeeded in creating an equitable access to finance for men and women in the year 2025. I mean, these are extraordinary breakthroughs that are coming. And we are now, as UNDP, very much embracing also AI. We have an AI sprint underway, again, to make ourselves literate enough to understand how people are developing responses, and then to be an institution that connects this frontier of learning for the benefit of humanity writ large, but also to every government, every citizen, and our sister agencies with whom we work so closely together, such as UNCTAD, to be a resource to the world. And I think this is a great service that we can provide. Thank you so
resource
much.
to the world. Thank you very much. Over there, please, thank you. So yeah, actually, we have a video now, but after the video, we have a panel that actually represents this creativity that Achim was alluding to. And as I was saying, let's hear directly now in this video from young people around the world that are the faces and the voices of both the present and the future. And let's also hear how AI is impacting their daily lives, along with key findings from the survey conducted by the UNDP for this report. Play the video.
I'm doing so many things in a single day, and I'm trying to keep up with everything that I do, being a student, working, and also being an entrepreneur. I think AI has been a very valuable asset for me, so I love it. And I encourage the world to use it in a positive way, and let's just keep this a very safe place. Thank you.
Artificial intelligence, it is absolutely helpful for the whole world, especially youth. It makes your life easy. My recommendation for the countries, especially like Pakistan, Afghanistan, that they do not have actual access to AI. The whole world needs AI currently. The world can go very positive further with AI.
Artificial intelligence helps me to provide more precisely analysis and actually helps me to have better skills. In general, I believe that's important because that's the main reason artificial intelligence is part of the international system and actually plays a crucial role, for example, in the Pact of the Future within the Digital Compact.
AI actually helps me research faster by giving me access to a lot of websites, lots of data, and lots of timely data as well. And it also helps me draft documents that are just a concept in my head and put them together to make it make sense. And it also helps me plan my day, my whole day, my morning to my afternoon to my night.
So I think about AI as a best friend. I like to use large language models specifically in order to refine my thoughts. And this enables me to be more productive in everyday's life. And I think it's necessary to check manually what the output is in order to be responsible for whatever you put out in this world.
So as the video shows, there is a lot of hope about how AI can support human development. What other examples do we have of best practices already out there showing what is possible and what is holding us back from moving towards a future and a present as well, where AI truly augments human potential. And what choices do we need to make right now to get us there? We're going to address that in the next panel discussion, and we will ask about that to our panelists that are already of them online, some of them. So please welcome Esther Dweck, Minister of Management and Innovation of Brazil, who is joining us online. Hello, Esther. Welcome Michael Spence, who is here in the audience physically, Nobel laureate and co-chair of the Human Development Report Advisory Board. Also here physically, we have Rose Mutiso, director of the African Tech Futures Lab. Please come here and join me. And online, 2 more people. Please come here, Michael. Such a gentleman. We also have online Urvashi Aneja, director of the Digital Futures Lab in India, and Raplan Ravana, co-CEO of Imagine Worldwide. Welcome everyone. Sorry for the delay. I know you have been waiting for us to hold this discussion. So let's begin with some examples. I have my glass already, so thank you very much. So for instance, Esther, I don't know if you can hear me. Yep, Esther. I will
Yes,
start
I can
asking
hear
you. Awesome, thank you very much. What are the use cases that you will highlight of using AI to improve public services?
Okay. Very good morning to all distinguished guests, both to those who are fortunate to be enough to be attending in person in Brussels, and those like myself who are following this important launch virtually. And I also would like to extend my warm greetings to Achim Steiner, Administrator of UNDP, to whom I thank for the kind invitation to join this panel, and to all the entire UNDP team, and as well as my distinguished co-speakers. So as a Minister of Management and Innovation in Public Service, I'm pleased to share that Brazil has climbed 5 positions in the Global Human Development Index since the last Human Development Report, which for us is a proof that the improvements that we are using to rebuild state capacity and to develop robust public capabilities are actually yielding concrete results to our citizens. And I'm glad that Brazil was chosen as one of the cases of the 20 countries that were included in the studies to see how AI can impact on human development. So to us, it's very important to use AI as a way to improve public services. So Brazil has launched last year an AI plan, which was built with our scientific committee. And this was very important in order to involve both social society and the government together to build this plan. So it's called AI for the Good of All. And the priorities we have are in many fields like education, like health, and many public services. And I would like to, but also as I was reading, listening to the panel before, we are very worried about inequalities. So in terms of education, we are discussing how to train people in order to retain our talents, that we are very worried that with this inequality that we have in the world, that most of our main good talents are actually going out from Brazil nowadays. So we want to retain them and how to, but we're also discussing how to go beyond only the tech hubs and how to actually improve in terms of rural communities, indigenous people, low-income neighborhoods. So it actually integrates thinking of abilities, ethical awareness, and also how to have the expertise in areas, as I mentioned, like healthcare, agriculture, public services. And one of the things I would like to comment on is we are discussing nowadays how to have a collaborative governance over technology determinism. So what we're discussing in Brazil, that the path that AI takes is not predetermined. It's shaped by choices to who participate in its development and oversight. And Brazil, as I mentioned, is establishing this multi-stakeholder governance to bring together government, industry, academy, and civil society to guide our AI journey. So for us, one of the things that we are discussing nowadays is the ethical on AI, especially in public services, because we've seen that all the bias that AI has, and we mentioned this before in the panel before, and also how to use it in order that society knows in a transparent way what exactly you're doing. And for us, we have been using a lot of international best practice to address apply to our socioeconomic reality. And we are institutionalizing ethical assessments in public service uses of AI in order to address this, to use it better in all the services that we think can actually improve people's life. So I think I'll stop here for the first talk, and I'll explain other examples in the next round. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. That's a good example of driving innovation with intent, which is one of the three priority areas of the Human Development Report. And you were talking about different areas. Perhaps we can continue with climate and energy. Rose? Whoops.
Is this on? Yeah,
Yeah.
I hope you can hear me. So in regards to examples.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll give an example that's a bit personal. So one of my mentees is a young woman in Kenya. She's in the final process of finishing her PhD in computer science and AI. So she is very interested in how we can better use solar predictive models to predict solar radiation. This is important, obviously, for citing renewable energy technologies. And there are a lot of global models. Some are commercially available, some are open source, but they're really what her research found is that they're optimized for the temperate regions and the equatorial band, the geophysical phenomena are different. And so those models are not plug and play, but we don't have enough data. It's very difficult to customize that for that equatorial band because a lot of the research activity has been in the temperate bands. And so she did some research where she's trying to calibrate those geophysical physical models and using statistical methods, using machine learning methods, calibrating with some limited data from Kenya and from the Meteorological Service. And it's really, really interesting work. And she overcome many barriers, finally just got it published in a global journal. And I think this is really, really interesting because it's adding layers to what has been discussed before. This is an example that has been given on AI and weather prediction. And so this is not just using AI and machine learning tools for weather prediction, but actually layering on solar radiation forecasting, which has implications for renewable energy siting. And so I think that the utility is really quite amplified in this situation. Something I'll just say one more thing that is extremely interesting about her case is she didn't have access to a powerful computer to run these models or to house those large data sets. And she also struggled to buy the data sets. It was because you have to buy also data from commercial satellite companies and whatnot. But we really, really struggled. In the end, we found some resourcing, a small amount of money to get her a gaming laptop. So it turns out these gaming laptops are quite powerful. And so I think what I found really interesting about this is that gaming laptops are for leisure in rich countries. So that these people have these juiced up laptops so that they can do maximum gaming here in richer countries. And this is like a young PhD student who we had to beg, borrow, and plead to get her a gaming laptop so that she could do this really, really important work, which was one of the earlier, one of the first examples of calibrating these large national weather prediction models for the equatorial band. So just a little bit of a point there on the inequality in terms of how people are benefiting from digital tools and technology.
Yeah, very good point. Talking precisely about laptops and education, Raplan, what's your experience in the education sector?
Thank you very much, and lovely to join you all. It was great to listen to your story, Rose. It triggers lots of thoughts and memories as well. My experience in education at Imagine Worldwide is that we're focused on making sure we can get at least 10 to 15 million children proficient in literacy and numeracy by the age of 10, and working specifically in countries like Malawi, Tanzania, and Francophone Africa. And what we have found particularly challenging is that there's many new amazing learning applications for literacy and numeracy, as well as other content in education. Very, very few are available in the languages that are relevant for foundational learning in many African countries. And secondly, most of these models are pretty far away from being suitable to be used offline on tablets. And our solutions are specifically designed to work offline so that children, even in rural schools, are able to consume and learn and use these tools. So we're seeing a number of these same constraints. So when I looked at the report really, and it's an amazing report, I think some of the things that came to mind to make sure that we can apply the recommendations and that we can achieve these sort of equitable outcomes is that we do need to recognize that generative AI or AI in general hasn't changed the fundamental value chain or ecosystem of dynamics in serving sort of last mile non-commercial stakeholders. And we do need to take deliberate efforts to actually close that gap. So I think from my side is really around how do we make sure we strategically invest in low resource languages in particular, and in the creation of those low resource language models and the like. How do we make sure that we work in direct collaboration with the local language experts who can contribute, co-create, and really also co-own those solutions and not just be data inputs or data points, but co-designers. And also ultimately be able to provide a equitable sort of data ownership framework that can facilitate access to this AI training data for developers while protecting the data rights of low resource language data subjects and creators. And to really make sure that we don't extract value out of these communities, but deliver. And in that way, I think if we can tackle the literacy element, then many more people can benefit from the use of AI across all sectors. We've certainly seen the impact that literacy and numeracy can have at the most basic level. And I think there's some organizations doing this in Africa, Masakani Research Foundation, a number of data scientists on the continent are also part of Deep Learning in Daba, where again, a lot of resource allocation to those kind of institutions can really dramatically change the quality and depth of low resource languages to support literacy and numeracy development.
Those are great examples of both driving innovation with intent and also another of the three key areas of action of the Human Development Report, that is investing in capabilities that count, precisely talking about AI literacy, which is so important, and AI skills as well. And also the language examples are really interesting. Achim was also giving an example earlier, and I know of many initiatives in Latin America as well to keep indigenous languages and also have large language models adapted to their cultural differences as well. It's not just a matter of language, but also cultural differences. And as well as there are many projects in Europe with minority languages. So yeah, it really interesting. Perhaps moving to the third priority area of action of the HDR, that is building a complementarity economy. Michael, are there any strong examples of this in practice?
Oh yeah, I mean, so there are many examples in this, going down the use case route is the right way to help people understand what they are. But one of the earlier studies was done by Eric Brynjolfsson and co-authors at Stanford. They trained the artificial intelligence, the AI, on literally tens of thousands of hours of audio recordings of customer service, customer interactions.
Oh yeah, I know that
you know
study.
Yeah. And then they calibrated that against standard performance measures. Did they solve the problem? How long did it take? Did the customer get angry? And then they gave it, the AI, to half the customer service agents and not to the other half. And they were carefully calibrated to vary in terms of experience and performance measures, of their personal performance measures. The overall productivity effect was, this is complementary, right? There was no reasonable expectation that the AI could write the people out of the script, even though there's a bias in that direction in the private sector, in my view. Overall productivity effect was 14%, but I think the most interesting thing, which I think is replicated in many, many use cases, is the least experienced customer service people who hadn't gone down the learning curve had a 35% increase in productivity almost immediately. And so what that tells you, I think, is what we keep discovering over and over again, is one of the powerful uses of this technology that comes out really well in the report is it's a sort of fancy learning tool. You see what I mean? That is, it collects the accumulated experience of a wide range of people and delivers it back in a form that makes it, useful to people who are trying to get something done. This may sound like a mundane example, but at the frontiers of this technology, when you get away from work and so on, you find the AIs are learning to do what solvers that deal with differential equations can do. I mean, this is literally at the frontier. In other words, there's patterns in things that we don't detect, and the AIs can find them. I'll just make one other comment, because I think the report, I was thrilled to have a minor role trying to help out with it this year, and it's a joy to work with Pedro and his team. But I think there's an awful lot of discussion of AIs as collaborators with people, and it's perfectly legitimate. But the AIs are also collaborators with complex systems. So, for example, they're being used increasingly in supply chains. Why? Because they make them more efficient, but even more important than that, in a world as turbulent as the one we live in, they adapt them faster. They make them more agile. In your world of climate change, it's almost impossible to imagine a smart grid. Now remember, the old grids had 3 power stations, transmission lines, and then a distribution system. The new ones with renewable energy have millions and millions of entities that are delivering power to the grid and taking it out. And that changes kind of minute by minute. So I think it's pretty much standard practice now that we're going to have AIs that are the assistants to the people managing the grids. Those are just 2 examples. So I think, and then Achim mentioned the stunning breakthroughs in science that I think, how do I say it? They're dramatically inclusive in the way the financial services ones are. AlphaFold, which was the successor to the game of Go, was developed by DeepMind in 2 years. And its aim was to predict the 3-dimensional structure of proteins, which you need to know if you know what they're going to bind to. So that's why it's relevant to vaccines and whatnot. I'm going to stop with this in a sec.
Yeah, because we need to continue.
And then they made a crucial decision, which I think is part of where we're aiming with the report that this year. Demis Hassabis, who just received the Nobel Prize, sat in a meeting and said, why don't we make these predictions for the 200 million known proteins in the world and publish it as an open source database? And everybody in the room said that's a great idea, and they did it. And the result of that is that there are 2.5 million biologists in 160 countries using this now. Right? And that's the path that we want to go down.
Yeah, perhaps AlphaFold is one of the best examples that we have in science, certainly. And let's not forget that we have been using AI for more than a decade now. There is a real hype now, but we have been using AI for many years already. Before AI, we had the internet, which also was a very incredible tool that allowed us to do many wonderful things, and it still does, except for the countries that still don't have like big capacity, and there's still a big digital divide. Let's not forget that as well. So yeah, it's clear from your examples that AI, in this case, is helping or augmenting more the ones with less skills. And it's an interesting example in the context of call centers, because traditionally the use of chatbots has been transferring the cost of time to consumers. It's a time tax, because these chatbots don't work properly, and then they need to spend more time, or even actually at the end they need to call someone because the thing is not working. Let's continue with the drive innovation with intent. Because that also means using evidence-based policy frameworks for equitable and sustainable digital futures, and that's precisely the work of Urvashi. Urvashi, can you provide some examples or tell us more about that?
Thank you, and thank you for having me here, and sorry to not be able to join you all in person, and a huge congratulations to the team behind this report. It's definitely one of the more nuanced analysis I've seen in recent years, and in some sense gives me great hope that we might be able to redirect AI trajectories to align with the public interest. And I'm also really appreciative around the point made around choice, highlighting that technological process must not be a force outside of democratic deliberation and steering, and that we have important choices to make. I'm happy to highlight a few use cases which we've come across in our work, which I think showcase some of the potential of AI and showcase some of the complementarity that you're talking about, as well as the point around kind of innovation with intent. For an example, we've seen AI being used to support greater citizen participation in conservation and biodiversity protection. We've also seen AI being used to combine geospatial data with community-level insights to build disaster vulnerability maps that reflect what a community's needs are and their kind of lived experiences. We've also seen AI used for participatory budgeting and for tracking of political spending. And we've also seen examples of AI being used to support people with disabilities. So I think, what is common amongst all of these examples that I've mentioned is that what they really do is that they shift kind of agency and power to the hands of the people, and they reflect the development or the kind of evolution of these use cases has really been a kind of bottom-up approach to AI development, where instead of producing AI and then expecting that people should upskill and be able to adapt to this new world of AI, it's really about asking, what do people really need, and how do we support how do we meet people where they are currently at their current level of capacity, and really shift kind of political power and use AI as a tool to shift political power. So I think there are a number of use cases like this, and I think those are the kind of opportunity spaces we need to expand. But the kind of word of caution that I'd also like to highlight over here is that I think we also should be wary of going too far down a use case approach to thinking about AI and human development. Use cases are important, and like Michael was saying, they really help tell a story, they really help illustrate where the potential lies, but a number of use cases alone will not add up to system change. They're not in themselves going to contribute to the transformation that we need. And for that, we need a kind of broader theory of change rather than just a bunch of use cases. And that broader theory of change has to involve the state. It has to involve people. It cannot be left to the private sector and market forces alone. Sorry. And I think the other point that I'd like to make is that, just tying back to the discussion that we had during the earlier panel, was that we need to also tie the dots between these various use cases and the structural problems that we're talking about. The very creation of modern AI systems is in some sense predicated on an exploitation of labor. It involves an exploitation of environmental resources. We wouldn't be able to move as fast as we can with so-called AI innovation if there wasn't cheap labor somewhere else providing that kind of very critical resource required to build those systems. The environmental costs of these systems are also not going down. The concentration of power is something that is a very, very critical issue that we have to face if we're thinking about the future of AI. So we really need to start joining the dots on these kind of potential use cases and think about, to what extent are we able to also address these structural problems? And by not looking at the structural problems while advocating for a use case approach, are we in some sense locking in some of these structural issues that we're talking about? And finally, I know we're kind of tight on time. So finally, I just want to, come back to the point around kind of policy and evidence-based policy and make 2 points there. What I found really, really reassuring about the report was that how it steered away from some of the hype around AI. And I think this is something we need to do as a very conscious effort. There's a lot of discussion about what AI can do, but we actually have very limited evidence of the impact of AI. And we need to build that evidence base. And that, I think, is a very critical task in front of us to understand where AI can work and where AI doesn't work. Sorry. And just finally, I think we have a huge regulation. Regulation plays a really important role in achieving that complementarity and innovation with intent that we talked about. If we look at currently what's happening, I think we're seeing a kind of worrying trend towards deregulation of AI systems as countries are looking to attract AI capital and become competitive in a global AI landscape. And really, we must make sure that we don't lose the momentum that we've had on AI regulation, particularly in the European Union, and the EU continues to be as a kind of global benchmark on AI regulation if we want to achieve those goals of complementarity and innovation with intent.
Thank you very much, Urvasin. Actually, you answered the next question I have for you all, which is what are the key challenges that we have ahead and what are the choices that we need to make to address them. So I'm going to pass that question to the rest of the speakers, but I will please ask to be concise because we don't have a lot of time. So perhaps 2 sentences of what are the challenges that you have identified, or even better, the choices that we need to make to address the challenges, because we have already talked about some challenges. If you want to mention more, it's okay. And let's start with Esther.
Okay, thank you. I think, as we mentioned, we have like 3 main inequalities that we should address: the infrastructure inequality, the data sovereignty inequality, and also capacity inequality. And these inequalities are not inevitable, as we know. They represent choices, and the choices will allow us to market forces and to shape AI development. So the choices should be to prioritize equity over growth, and also to prioritize complementarity of AI over simply automation of process, excluding people from this process. And in Brazil, in order to do this, we have invested 23 billion reais, which is only $4.5 billion US, which is much less than any developed country. But we have to be very specific where we build this. So one of the things that we're trying to use is to develop Portuguese language models in order to keep our cultural heritage, to keep our data, also to train models in order to be able to resolve problems that are specific to the Brazilian capacity, and also building high-performance computing infrastructure and platforms where people can actually use AI in a way much easier than if you don't have this infrastructure. So we are trying to do this, and for all of this, we're trying to use knowledge sharing and digital public goods approach also in order to help help interest and also to collaborative work in terms of internationally, and in nations where interest in that could engage in efforts to tackle collective such global challenges. Because as we know, otherwise we can keep all the inequalities, and this can be used in a good for all could actually be worsening and increasing inequality in the world. So thank you again for the invitation, and that's my thought for that.
Thank you very much. Rose.
Yeah, so I think for me, I'm always thinking about the challenge of real world friction and where technology meets the real world. So, you know, for example, even with AlphaGo and all of those great advances there to move that into real world impact, you know, probably you need validation in labs, you need, I don't know, medical trials, depending, you know, like there's a lot of stuff in the real world that needs to exist. And I think often we don't get the balance right of, we get excited about technology and underinvest in the real world systems. We see that Africa is a good example. So we are underinvesting in our electricity systems, we're underinvesting in our digital infrastructure, we're underinvesting in our human capital, all of the real world systems that need to interlock with these technological systems. And sometimes the technology, yeah, we get, you know, like hypnotized to think that we can bypass those real world systems and those frictions. It's really the leapfrogging dilemma. And it's a difficult one because in many ways, the technology can indeed enable leapfrogging. It's just kind of understanding what are the binding constraints in the real world and investing wisely. So I'm always concerned about our getting distracted and losing sight of the investments that need to happen, not in the digital sphere, but in the real world sphere.
It's a very important one, and actually it's regarding the AlphaFold case. It's often not highlighted how many people were necessary to actually, for them to achieve this, to predict the whole human, almost the entire human proteome and other animals' proteome. And also not just people working on these actual systems, AI systems, but also the many years of collaborative research from researchers all over the world to achieve this, not just a machine or a software.
Yeah, and I'll just say, I'm a material scientist, so my training is really in stuff. Like, I'm really fixated on matter, you know, so I always keep coming back to that. There's something kind of substantive and real and physical and grounded about, and that's the real difficult part of the equation, and we keep trying to run away from it and seek solace in a leapfrogging dream. And it's just a balance, because the potential is there to transform, but we can't lose sight of the real world, the physical stuff.
Yeah. Michael?
I agree with Rose. I mean, by the way, the GPUs, to go back to your earlier example, were developed primarily for gaming originally, right? And now they're the horsepower in the... Look, I mean, for me, it's fairly simple. We need all of your organizations to collaborate to get the infrastructure built so people have access to this as a tool, not as a substitute for, you know, education, human capital, and so on. There's so many dimensions it can be a tool. And the second thing, this has come up several times in the course of the discussion. I have a huge amount of confidence that if you give the young creative people the tools, they'll start solving problems. And this global explosion of entrepreneurial activity that Akim referred to is an example of it. It's real, there's no question. Inclusive growth patterns, et cetera. So that's where I would focus.
Actually, there is a study on the use of young people and older people or more senior professionals, the use of LLMs. And actually, the more senior people, they were using it better because they were applying the critical thinking to the results, because you know the problem of hallucinations. In the case of generative AI, of course, this doesn't apply to everything and all the cases, but I think it's an interesting one. Michael, do you think, like, yes or no, do we need a new social contract? Is this even a question? Say the question again. Do we need a new social contract?
Yes.
Yes. It's not even a question. We have Raplan and Urvashi. Well, Urvashi, you already did, so Raplan.
Sure. I think maybe just to add another dimension to the thinking, the report talked a lot about how we should be focusing on magnifying the agency of human beings, and I 100% agree. But I think that what will be important to make sure we achieve that is that we should also continuously explore how AI systems will subtly shape people's decisions over time, whether in financial services or healthcare, etc. Everything from those invisible nudges in terms of how products are ranked or what is recommended, how it's framed. All of these micro decisions that are often made by algorithms can direct user behavior in ways that may not feel like a choice. And if we really want to make sure that AI acts in support of autonomy and doesn't quietly erode sort of this autonomy, I think we will also need to double click on that.
Autonomy and agency. Achim was also mentioning that earlier. So perfect. Thank you very much for sticking to the timing. And now it's time for the Q&A. So please get ready to ask your questions both here and online. I know that we already have a couple of questions from people joining all over the world in the Zoom. And for this, we are going to start with a special guest that we have among the audience. I don't know if she already has the microphone. Yes, please. I will ask you to please introduce yourself.
Hello. Hi, how are you? Thank you for giving me the floor. My name is Nicole Cardoch. I'm Undersecretary of the Ministry Secretary General of Government of Chile. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to the organization and the speakers and congratulate the work of the United Nations Development Programme on its 2025 report. Chile, as you know, is committed to promoting integral development with gender equality and focus on human dignity. Therefore, we consider the reflection of the implication of artificial intelligence in today's world as a matter which requires a wide approach. In this sense, and following the reflection that UNESCO has made regarding the relationship between AI and democracy, I would like to ask how can AI be used as a tool to deepen democracy? Thank you.
Good question. I don't know if Urvashi or maybe, I don't know, someone here who would like to answer that? Rose, yeah? Is that open? Yes.
Okay, yes, sorry. Yes, I'm only jumping on this. This is not precisely my area, but I'm jumping on this question because I literally just wrote a piece last month in which I flagged erosion of democracy as my biggest short-term fear of AI in Africa. So I don't.
So you agree with the question?
Yeah. So no, actually, I don't have an. I have an anti-answer, which is I see only trouble. And I think that we've already seen the damage wrought by social media and misinformation and meddling, and now I think AI really will enable that at a scale, new tools for manipulation, and in ways that are more sophisticated. And so I was writing a piece about what are the short-term threats, and actually I felt, and benefits, and I felt the economic dislocation for most Africans right now in the short term is neither here nor there. I'm really concerned about the democracy. So I will now turn over to another panelist who will hopefully answer the question for you and for me.
Yeah, and attention economy deepening, and also surveillance capitalism, as we can see now, generative AI companies are turning into surveilling companies as well. So Urvashi, perhaps you want to answer that question briefly?
Sure. I think I also have an anti-answer, but
Okay.
to add another anti-answer, I think we have really important lessons to learn from earlier moments of technological progress, right? And I think social media provides us a really useful kind of prism. When we had kind of social media come onto the scene, we were all very taken by the promise of social media and kind of democratizing access and information access, democratizing our knowledge ecosystem, connecting all of us, etc. But we didn't pay enough attention to how the introduction of social media is also shifting power within our societies. And I think that's what we need. That's the lesson we need to take away now from the current AI moment. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier. I don't think it's enough to just focus on the use cases. We also need to think about what, as we build those use cases, as those use cases become more prevalent, how is power also shifting and where is power sitting in the current ecosystem? And what we're currently seeing is that that power is sitting with a handful, a very small handful of technology companies. And I think the question for us is that, can we really continue with the current kind of model that we have of AI innovation and expect kind of stronger democracies if we don't address this concentration of power issues? So I do think, if we want to save democracy, if we want greater accountability, addressing the market concentration issue has to be top of the agenda. And for that, we need much, much stronger regulation. And I do think that good regulation will drive good innovation. And we have the example of electric vehicles in the EU as perhaps the most recent example of that. So we shouldn't pit innovation against regulation.
So we have more questions than answers, at least in this realm. Let's turn to one of the online questions. How do we balance near-term infrastructure needs, energy, connectivity, with investments in AI capabilities where resources are limited? I don't know who would like to answer this. Michael, perhaps, or Esther, don't know. How?
There's always constrained resources in the world, so anybody who's operated in a government or anywhere near it knows you have to make choices, and sometimes they're pretty uncomfortable choices. And we do have a pile of challenges before us, including especially climate change, that are going to demand very large amounts of resources. So it's an uncomfortable moment. But I think from an international point of view, the most important thing is, roughly speaking, a reflection of what Pedro reported, which is the low-income countries are losing ground. The pandemic knocked out their fiscal capacity. The global economy is a much harder place to operate in than it used to be, et cetera. And so I think if we solve that problem, I have reasonable confidence that the middle-income countries in various categories and the developed countries can sort their way through this choice.
Hope, more hope.
I can add just a little bit on this question because it's an active area of debate in the African context. Like, is this a pie in the sky thing that we should be focusing on maternal health? We have real problems, and is this a distraction? And I think what the conclusion I've arrived at is actually a lot of the fundamentals that you need for AI, and this came out in the report very clearly, like the fundamentals that you need to raise human standards are basically to raise the HDI. You need electricity, you need other digital infrastructure, you need, these are no regrets investments. So I think certainly in poor countries, I don't really see the dichotomy or the conflict. I just think that to even have a foot in the door with AI, you have to have built infrastructure that serves many, many purposes.
I would certainly agree.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I would say very briefly to give the floor to more people.
Okay, no problem. I was going to say that I certainly agree with Rose's response, and I wanted to just give the example of how we think about these kind of things. When we are rolling out technology in schools, for example, we also need to provide solar and connectivity and the like. And there's always been projects or initiatives to provide more infrastructure, energy, or anything else. But when you combine the outcomes and benefits that are going to accrue to the school, so not just lighting, but also learning showing gains because the technology is also arriving. It has helped us be able to bring multiple stakeholders across ministries together to be able to pool the resources to get to those outcomes. So I would rather ask the question is, how can AI solutions possibly become an output or result of some of these infrastructure investments, or even be assisted by it? And then it's not a either or conversation.
Thank you very much. There are some questions there. We have like quite a few questions. I don't know. I don't think we're going to have time for all of them. So perhaps what we can do is, yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was going to do. Thank you. We can collect all the questions. There are 4 as I can see, and then answer. Yes, you're allowed to ask.
Thank you so much.
Please introduce yourself.
Opportunity. My name is Lu. Lu Zhaiyuan is my full name. Right now, I work in the industry, actually a lot with AI. I actually help other companies apply AI tools in their day-to-day business. And actually, my question is the following. In a recent project, I was in charge to use AI and software robots to reduce the amount of people working in administration in a big media company. The result of it will be that the company would have a much faster order to delivery time, but the downside is that there will be much less people working in that department, and the CFO is looking forward to cut staff in order to gain more margins. And I see it across several industries. In the place where I work, the companies who do not apply AI in their business lose their competitive advantage. So from my point of view, many people actually will lose their jobs, and the companies who are refusing to adapt to it, they lose more margins. And in nowadays world, some industries, they only have a few percent of profits, and it's for them very difficult to also care for the social side. And my question is, of course, how should we, as a society, look into this problem? Thank you.
Thank you, and I will suggest, please, for next people asking to just stick with the question instead of doing introductions that are like too long, please. The next one is there.
Good morning. I am Ambassador Sais Narayan Singh, representing the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. I just have 2 questions, but I want to just thank UNDP for launching this very important report, especially with a focus on the AI. I have a quick announcement. Guyana will be hosting an AI conference in January 2026 under the hostess being His Excellency Dr. Mohamed Irfan Ali, the President of the Cooperative Republic. But to my question, how can AI be utilized with regards to helping to support especially the younger people in their combating of understanding the deep concept of emotional intelligence? I notice when we look at the graph, the younger people are at the lowest level as compared to other age group. So can AI help on that front with regards to emotional intelligence, helping them to combat things like frustrations, anger management? While we know it's all emotional issues, there might be some explanation. And my last question is, I would like to hear a little bit more from the minister from Brazil on the development happening with regards to AI in that country. Guyana being very close to Brazil, keenly interested in deepening those collaborations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. 2 more questions there.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Luigia Di Gisi from UNESCO Liaison Office to the European Union. So I would like to thank Undersecretary from Chile to referring and to refer to UNESCO work in the field of ethics of AI. Indeed, UNESCO is the specialized agency with the mandate on ethics of AI, and we adopted the first ever standard setting instrument on the ethics of AI in 2017. And I would also also would like to take the opportunity to remind that we have a well-established partnership with the European Commission, INTPA, and we are working to implement the recommendation on the ethics of AI worldwide, around the world. So many thanks for the opportunity, and pleased to join this discussion today.
Thank you very much. It wasn't a question, but very welcome to know and your suggestion. Thank you very much. And then there is another question there, I think. No? Okay. So we have one more question online, and we can answer all of them quickly. Are there inclusive models of AI adoption that play to a country's strengths? For example, renewable energy potential, indigenous knowledge, etc., and minimize threats of dependency or exclusion. Okay, so I can see you're writing down. So who would like to answer the question? There was one question for Esther, so perhaps you can answer that one. Yeah.
Okay. I'll just give a quick thought on that democracy question before also, because I know, just to say two things. I think one thing is we need international regulation on that, because as we mentioned, this is an international problem, and like environmental, if we don't have an international regulation, it'd be very difficult to address this. So, and another thing that we had a report with UNDP talking about democracy. And what we mentioned before, to use AI to help actually to improve state capacities is something that actually could improve democracy, I think. If we actually use it in a way to provide better services, we have discussed this, that when state is able to provide services that is helpful to improve people's life, this could actually improve democracy. So I think we can think this in both ways. What the questions that were raised before that was threatening, but I think in this needs international regulation. But the second one is to improve state capacity. And there's especially the question from the ambassador of Guyana. Thank you for the question. Brazil has launched this plan last year, and we are discussing in different levels in terms of the industry, in terms of infrastructure, and in terms of state public services. And I would just address some specific things that we are doing in terms of public sector that I think could help Guyana. We are discussing, for instance, detection and prediction of illegal deforestation, detection of forest fires, of oil spills in marine waters, detection of wildlife trafficking. So I think we have many things that's applied to social services that could actually be discussed with Guyana. There's something, I think, challenge that we have. Both countries have a lot in common. And of course, in terms of infrastructure, could also discuss a lot. So thank you for your question. This plan has been launched last year. We are now institutionalize its governance, so it have many examples and could share. Of course, you want to do this in terms of digital public goods or digital public infrastructure in order to be able to share with other countries. So for me, it's very important. And just one quick talk on losing jobs.
I'm sorry. We don't have more time. We actually don't have even time to answer the other questions, I'm being told, and I need to obey. So let's keep it like that. But I have good news for the ones that are actually here in person, because we have a live reception now, and you can actually speak with the speakers and ask them your questions directly. So it's a grab. And just to recap briefly on what happened today, our distinguished speakers were emphasizing the importance of multilateralism, to not be intimidated by AI, and not let suppliers be the ones deciding in a world ruled by tech oligopolies. There is a risk of exacerbating the negative externalities of AI, as human replacement, environmental issues, disinformation, mental well-being, digital and AI divides, and so on. But there are also opportunities that can be harnessed if we take the right decisions and the right choices to augment human capabilities and expand scientific achievement, improve health systems, medicine, environment, education, and again, so on and so on, and much more. Thank you all the speakers for all your insights. Thank you all the authorities joining us today. Thank you, of course, to the audience here and online, our global audience, and a big applause for the UNDP and the extended team. the team that made this possible. It has been an incredibly inspiring event and launch of the Human Development Report. And now for the ones that are here, please join the reception on the first floor. The people, the staff will guide you there. And for people online, please continue the conversation online. This is just the beginning, and the report is going to be presented in many other places in the next few weeks. Thank you very much.